Uh, all right. Hello, everyone. So, my name is Tu. I'm in charge of MakerDAO's Korean office as well as partnership for the Asian region. So, welcome to Korea, where you guys can have Korean barbecue and soju. So, since you came here, instead of having Korean barbecue and soju, I guess it's good that we use this time to learn more about DeFi as well as MakerDAO, right? But you hear about MakerDAO a lot anyway, so let's talk about like the finance part, right? So we use a lot of different parts of finance. It can be your credit card, it can be your insurance, it can be lending, everything, right? So there are many kind of areas we're already using finance, but for this one, there are several problems with the current system, right? So one of the interesting is that there's a lot of complicated process to actually use it, as well as usually it requires KYC, right? So if you want to have a loan, you have to go there and prove that like why do you need it, things like that. And then you also see it's not transparent. You don't know where your money is going usually, as well as you will realize that there's a lot of different like potential fraud and things like that. So how decentralized finance kind of fixes it is that so decentralized finance itself, right? We call it DeFi. Not only includes lending, but it also includes different areas like DEX, prediction markets, and many others. And then the thing about DeFi is that it's transparent, and then it's decentralized, and it's also very efficient. And then right now within DeFi space, MakerDAO, we lead the market with around 52% of the market share. So we're pretty big, but maybe it can be bigger. Yeah, so to briefly talk about like even before we talk about DeFi, right? So let's talk about like when this kind of cryptocurrency loan service, especially since we're talking about MakerDAO, we were talking about loan service. So in the beginning, a lot of those loan services actually conducted just through like P2P, right? So you went to a place like Bitcoin Talk and be like, hey guys, give me 1 Bitcoin, I will give you 2 Bitcoin, and people fall for it, right? So a lot of those are scams. It was not really like transparent, obviously, and it was very centralized. And then also, if people remember, there was also a case like BitConnect where they tried to be like a lending and loan service and like staking service, but it turned out to be a Ponzi scheme, right? So in the beginning, there were a lot of fraud. And then we have more like professional ones, right? So for example, we have companies like Nexo, BlockFi, which are they're not transparent. They're also centralized and also need KYC, but at least they're not like scams, right? Like the others we talk about. So how is like decentralized like finance, especially like loan service, different, right? So the thing is that there are many different examples. I mean, Maker is one of them, as well as DYDX, as well as Compound. So though some of the strengths will be that we are transparent, decentralized, and efficient. So before we even talk about like other things, I guess we can talk about MakerDAO system, right? So for MakerDAO, it's made of two tokens. One is called DAI, which is a stable coin that's pegged to $1, and another is called a Maker token, which helps. It's a governance token that helps to DAI to be pegged to $1. So how it kind of works is that so for a lot of stable coins, like for example USDC from Circle, talk about theirs as well. So usually for those stable coins, they have to go through banks or like financial institutions. However, for Maker system, we don't go through banks. We go through smart contract, which has strength and weakness. But so the interesting is that we're backed by Ethereum right now. So they put Ethereum in a smart contract, and that's how it works. So we used to have around like 2% of Ethereum supply. Right now, it reduced to like 1.5%. And then it works by having CDP, which is our DApp that I'm going to explain later, as well as the decentralized, transparent, and efficient. So if you think about it, so users are able to produce mints and produce and mint DAI by having Ethereum as a collateral in the smart contract, and then it's very similar to how like central bank work, at least like the kind of old days. But so you can have a LTV of 66%. So that means that if you let's say have a 1 Ethereum, and then the Ethereum is worth like $100, then if you put the 1 Ethereum, then you can borrow up to 66 DAI. And then right now stability fee is around actually 10.5%, so they reduced it. And then so actually going back to it, I want to say like the reason why this is very revolutionary was that we talk about the traditional finance, right? So within traditional finance, if you want to have a loan like that, you would have to go through so many different steps, right? So, for example, you have to go, you have to prove like who you are. You also have to go and try to have your, let's say, different assets as collateral. And usually they were not gonna accept Ethereum, right? So even if they accept Ethereum, you need to talk about how it's gonna get liquidated, things like that. But for us, it's just a smart contract that's doing it. Like we don't require KYC. We also don't have steps like that. So it's much more efficient. So I'm not gonna talk too much about MakerDAO, as most of you guys probably know. Like MakerDAO, we are listed on like Coinbase and many others. We also have partners like UNICEF and many others. So I'm gonna talk more about DeFi as well as like some of our like different loan services that are in DeFi. So compound finance is another one that's gaining a lot of traction. So interesting about compound finance is that it has pretty good liquidity, as well as so MakerDAO, right? We only can have Ethereum as collateral, but for compound finance, you can have other ERC20 tokens as collateral as well. So for example, you can have BAT as well as like Omiseko as collateral. And then some of the weakness, it's kind of similar to Maker, is that they have a changing interest rate. And then some of them, so if you're looking for like a long-term, like stable interest rate, then it's not really for you. And then we also have an example of DYDX, which is they integrated not only like similar to Compound in a way that you can borrow and lend, but at the same time they also integrate with DEX, and you can do a leverage up to 4x. So some of the concern is that compared to this Compound Finance, it doesn't have many great token selection as well as interest rate changes and things like that. So some of the interesting about future of DeFi has been that, so usually DeFi has been focusing a lot on Europe and United States, but now different countries are also interested in DeFi. So we're also seeing several DeFi projects coming out in Korea as well. Actually, some of them are going to present today as well. So for example, there's a Trinito, which is made by a company called DXM, which is a subsidiary of Doowan Nam, which is a parent company of Upbit. And then there's also some others, like I think Terra might be here as well, but Terra is a stable coin as well. And then we're also seeing some DeFi projects that are on different mainnets instead of Ethereum, like for on EOS, as well as like Binance Chain and many others. So if you want to learn more about DeFi, then so DeFi Pulse is a good website to learn about like what's happening with like DeFi dominance, as well as look at like how much Ethereum is locked. And then you can also look at loan scan to compare interest rates as well. So those are useful sites. And then if you want to learn more about MakerDAO, you can do this. Now, so thank you for what's coming, but we have actually a lot of time left over. So I'm gonna use the rest of time for Q&A if that's okay. Okay, sure. So if you have any questions or you have a criticism, you think that we are like a central bank that needs to be killed, whatever, just ask us. Yeah. Questions? Yes, ask. Oh, you're asking about multi-collateral DAI? Yes, so we have a multi-collateral DAI coming out soon. But in blockchain, when we say soon, it means soon, but we don't know how soon, right? But yeah, so we're going to have a multi-collateral soon. And then, so by having multi-collateral, that means that we can have different tokens as collateral as well. Because right now, we only have Ethereum as collateral. But then, for example, we can have Omisego and tokens like that. So that's going to help our liquidity as well as adoption. Thank you. And then other questions? Yes, good question. So question is that, okay, I understand that you guys are pegged to US dollar, but do you guys really love like US that much? Like, do you want to have like a Euro DAI or something like that? The answer is yes, it's going to come out, but not soon. That's going to be later. So for example, we're going to have a DAI that's pegged to Euro as well as Yen and others as well. But obviously, there's a lot of concerns we will have over like how it's going to create it. We call it a synthetic DAI. That's how we call it. So it's going to come out later. All right, other questions? Usually when I do this and I have to be like, hey, if you ask question, I'll give you DAI, and people raise hand. But I know that you guys are very interested in DeFi, right? That's why you guys came here instead of going to Chimek and things like that. So the chicken and beer now. So any other questions? Okay, I didn't hear the question. How many contracts? Okay, can you, yeah. Yeah, so she said something about contracts, so in my mind I was like, are you talking about devil's contract or something like that? But then I guess not, but yeah.
How many maker contracts there exist in the system? Like how many contracts have Ether staked upon them right now to mint DAI? How many?
Yeah, so, okay, so that's a good question. I don't know, like, well actually I can see the number, but I don't have the number right now. But in terms of quantity, we have around right now 80 million DAI locked up. and then our collateralization ratio is around 3.6 times ish. So that's gonna be at least like 250 million dollar worth of Ethereum locked up. Yeah. But actually, if you go to a tool called MakerDAO, then you can actually look at the list of like CDP, how many like CDPs are there and things like that. All right, some other questions. Oh yes, ask.
Yeah, that's a question about the Oracle system used by the MakerDAO. Are you considering alternatives? Like you have multi-collateral. Are you considering multi-Oracle system to feed the price into the market?
Wait, did you ask a question about Oracle or?
Oracle, yes. Oracle.
Or Oracle, yeah. So yes, so that's a very interesting question, and then we've been working on it as well. So recently, there have been several validators that do the Oracle for us, and it used to be secret, right? Top secret. But then we actually now share some of the institution one. So for example, we have groups like DYDX as well as like SET that are doing like sharing the Oracle part for us. But some of them are not private. Some of them are not public yet. So. All right. Any other questions? I think that I can take maybe like 2 more or 3 more. All right. Question? Yes.
I was wondering when you will add non-trustless assets like just regular fiat currencies to your system, who will take care of the custody?
Okay, that's a very good question. Okay.
Assuming that the euro and dollar will not be digital in the near future.
Okay. So the question he asked is actually a really good question, right? So if you have assets that are, let's say, so-called not like trustless, right? For example, let's say real estate or like bonds or stocks like that, like how the system is gonna work. And that honestly, right now, we don't have a definite answer because that requires a lot of a different consideration, right? For example, there's a legal issue as well as a technical issue. And then there's some people who are worried, like, for example, if you have real estate, what happens if the government just comes in and just seizes it, right? So that things like that. But at the same time, some people argue that it's good for our liquidity to have those kind of tokens. I think that some of the alternatives that we've been also talking about, but it's not like definite, is also having tokens that are pegged to certain value, right? So for example, there's a project called UMA, and then what UMA does is that they peg it, for example, S&P 500, or like they can even peg to gold or things like that. And then that's something that we can use as well. Now, obviously, that's not like a simple solution because you also need to think about like liquidity and things like that. So it needs to be like discussed more. But that's a really good question, and that's something that really we are really discussing about these days. Yep. All right. Yep.
Is regulation one of the biggest issues for Maker, or are there any other things that might make the MakerDAO project fail?
So good question. It's like, so what's gonna make MakerDAO fail? That I have to move my job, right? That's a good question. I should think about it more. I mean, there are potential risks to MakerDAO, right? For example, there might be a hacker. I mean, we know how the original DAO, didn't work out too well. So that, or it can be also a fault of a governance part. But the way that we try to mitigate those problems, right? It's like, for example, in terms of funding or things like that, we've been having it in like multi-sig with like many, like not just like multi-sig with like 3 people just sharing it, like a lot of people. So even like if hacker wants to really hack away our system, they need to go through so many different steps. I think that it might be easier to just go through like a real bank and just rob it. So, yeah. But that's a really good question, and I should think about it more. All right, so I think that I have a question. I can maybe ask like one last question. So, one last question, and you can get a brownie points now. Actually, I kind of wonder how they translate the word brownie points. Good translators, but yeah. All right, no questions? Okay, one last question. Will you give me DAI if it's the last question? Yes, I will. But it might be a 0 DAI, so who knows? But yeah. Okay, so that was the last question. Okay, that's a perfect question. All right, I think that thank you so much for coming and have fun. Let's have a Korean barbecue someday. All right, thank you.